Hi, I'm Sonia White Jaguar, and welcome to this edition of White Jaguar Wednesdays, my semi-monthly series where I discuss spiritual subjects inspired by your questions. So I received a question from someone asking about what happens to the soul after death. Do they continue to grow and change? Because this person was under the impression, they were taught that after death, basically the soul enters this state where they're in perfect peace, bliss, enlightenment, and there's no more growth and change. They enter a very static state. And obviously the experiences that I have had with the actor Alan Rickman after his death, that's not what I experienced. So what I would like to do is just delve a little deeper into that question and provide some examples from my book, which if you haven't read it yet, you can read it for free on Wattpad. It's called From Actor to Healer, Alan Rickman's New Life as a Spirit Guide. And I literally watched him transform into a spirit guide and grow and change. So let me just share with you a few samples here. So it started with my giving him the Reiki Level 1 attunement. I had had some brief experiences with him a few months after his death, and then it came to a head. It was about 3 months after his death. And he asked me to give him this attunement. And so he shared with me after that what happened to him. And so he said that after that attunement, he said, "You healed me. You healed my soul, that burning ache. I can't describe it, but it was gone after the Reiki attunement, completely gone. How I wish I could have told you, how I had felt at the time. You set me on fire. You freed me. You saved me from myself." So what that shows is that when he died, he clearly was not in a state of perfect peace, bliss, enlightenment. He clearly had some issues going on, and he needed some healing, and he actually received healing. So that right there shows that he went through a change. He did not enter a static state. He was actually able to receive a Reiki attunement and receive healing in the higher dimension, as a disembodied spirit. So he did go on to explain a little bit more, and he said, "I was so sick at the end of my life." Now, Alan had died of cancer. He was 69 when he died. So he says, "I was so sick at the end of my life. I was in so much pain, physically and emotionally. Seeing my family suffer as they watched me deteriorate was devastating. I couldn't do anything but watch them fuss over me. I wanted to tell them I was all right and they would be all right. I could already sense those things as I started to let go of my body. When it was all over, I felt quite dazed and didn't know what to do. I was standing in a doorway. Then I heard voices calling my name and something tugged at my heart." So I just want to stop there for a second and point out that he's acknowledging that before he died he was in pain, but he had an awareness, though. He had an awareness that he was going to be okay. He knew that he was going to go through this transition and leave the body, but then he would be okay. He could sense that, so he did have that awareness. But then after his death, he said, "I felt quite dazed and didn't know what to do." So again, he's being very honest there and saying, yeah, I was not in a perfect, peaceful, blissful state. He's saying I was dazed and didn't know what to do. So he heard voices, and so I asked him, "Did you recognize the voices?" And he says, "I recognized some of them, yes. They were family and friends, some of whom I'd known before this lifetime, like you. He had recognized me when I had made contact with him." And so that's another point, to make, is that, yes, when we leave the body, we do have, some awareness, some knowledge. We do recognize people that we had known before. So he recognized these people who were communicating with him. And he said, I didn't want to go yet. I told them to wait. I felt like I still had something to do here. And I said, then what happened? And he said, I waited. I stood in the doorway for a long time. I could see everything from the doorway. I watched my family here on earth. I felt their grief, their pain, their joys. I was aware of everything, and yet I felt so lonely and isolated in that state. So he could see what was going on here, on earth, but yet at the same time, he said he felt lonely and isolated. So again, not that everybody, who dies experiences this, but I think Alan has provided a great example of something that can happen if you're not ready, to make your transition. You could end up in a state where you're confused and you feel isolated and you don't know what to do. So this was his experience. Basically, I'll share a few other things that had happened to him that he said. So he admitted that his cancer diagnosis had hit him hard emotionally. He'd been a passionate philanthropist, and this life had given him a multitude of opportunities to mentor people and support causes. He had deeply loved his family, friends, and achievements so much that he wasn't ready to let go of this life. I thought I was ready, he said. Quite simply, I fell in love with this life all over again and just couldn't leave. That's why you stayed in the doorway, I asked. He stayed in that doorway for a few months. He explained that he did not, what we would call, cross over or go into the light and enter the next dimension and move on. He was not ready to do that right away. So I said, okay, you fell in love with this life all over again. And I said, that's why you stayed in the doorway, I asked. That's not the only reason, he said. Even before he said the word, I could sense where he was going, grief. He said the grief of his family, friends, and fans had tethered him to the earth plane. My home then became a sanctuary for him because I wasn't mourning his loss. He said, your home shielded me from this. I didn't feel the grief when I was in your house. When I wasn't in your home, it was very strong. I trusted that it would subside with time, and it did. But in the beginning, it was terribly overwhelming. I felt very uncomfortable. So again, he was feeling emotions. He was reacting to what was happening here. So with, the people all over the world, thousands, millions, of people grieving him, not just family and friends, but fans. He felt that, and that actually tethered him here, even if only temporarily. So then Alan explained that his life force had begun to diminish in the weeks following his death because he needed energy in order to remain in his doorway and avoid going into the light. He replenished his life force by siphoning energy from me. He said he did it about once a week, usually after the Reiki circle when I got a boost of energy. And he said, I figured you wouldn't notice that way. I wanted the Reiki. It wasn't you I wanted, it was the Reiki. I talked with other spirits in the center. They came for the Reiki as well. They came to drink from the well and heal themselves. They told me how to do it, but I did it wrong. I took from your soul instead of the Reiki. I'm so sorry, I didn't know what I was doing. Please forgive me. So I think that's another really important thing to note, that he was coming for healing. He actually talked to other spirits who had come for healing. So clearly it was not just him, who saw value in the Reiki energy. There were other spirits who were coming for healing as well and were attracted to the Reiki energy. And they showed him, how to take the Reiki, but yet, like he says, I did it wrong. I was siphoning your life force energy instead of the Reiki energy. So again, that shows that when he died, he didn't suddenly automatically know, how to do that. He actually had to learn how to do it. And he didn't even do it right when he did it. So I think that's very important to note, that it shows that when we die, we don't instantly know everything. We are still able to learn new things. So anyway, then I talked about how for those weeks when he was siphoning my energy, I didn't feel like myself. I described it as feeling like an ogre. Something was wrong, but I couldn't identify what it was. And so then I asked him, I said, did you know you were hurting me? And he says, not at first. I had a feeling a couple months later. One day I took your energy and you got worse. That's when I knew. I panicked. I tried other sources, electronic devices, computers, your smartphone, your refrigerator. Nothing worked. Only you. That's when I realized I had a problem. I was in trouble and I couldn't talk to you. I was afraid you would force me to go into the light. Then I thought of the Reiki attunement. If it worked, I could give myself energy like how you taught your students. So it shows that he is responding to what was happening, around him. He did not know, that he was hurting me. It wasn't until he observed, the behavior, that he saw that something was wrong, and then he tried other sources and nothing worked. So he did not know, that if he tried these other devices, that wasn't going to work. He had to actually try it. But then he thought of the Reiki attunement, and the same thing. He didn't know if that was going to work or not. So I said, I never would have thought to give a Reiki attunement to someone who was recently deceased. I had performed the initiation on faith. If I had known what was going on, I would have handled the situation differently and urged Alan to go into the light. So I said to him, I had no idea we could attune spirits to Reiki. And he says, I had no idea either. The thought just occurred to me. I was willing to try anything. I was alone and afraid and desperate. So I think he makes it very clear, as to what was going on and why he made the decisions that he did. From there, what I want to talk about is we talked about cancer, and I offered him the next attunement after Reiki level 1. So we did Reiki level 2, and basically I said, okay, since the first attunement had helped him in ways that I couldn't comprehend, I thought the second one might further his healing. So I'm catching on now, and I'm realizing, okay, this is having an effect, right? And so we did the next attunement, and afterwards he said, thank you, I am feeling the effects. It's hard to put into words, but the heaviness from the cancer is starting to lift. I feel lighter, freer. It's incredible. So it's showing that he is still healing, from his experience with cancer in this lifetime, that attunement actually helped to dislodge, some of the energy that he was still carrying. So clearly, when he left this life, he did not instantly release that pain and suffering, that he had experienced when he had the cancer. It required some more healing, and he got that from the Reiki attunement. So I myself, as a Reiki master, learned a lot about the power of Reiki, how we can use Reiki in a different way, to help people. So obviously I'm learning, as well as him. So anyway, what happened then too was I noticed a strange smell in the house, and I asked him, I said, do you know what this strange smell is? It was a putrid odor. And he said, that's medicine. I had been given intravenously in the hospital shortly before my death. Sorry, I am still recovering from my ordeal. I didn't realize that was going to happen. And I said I understood that losing his life to cancer had devastated him, and this smell was a manifestation of the pain he was still carrying in his heart. Even though he was now in a better state, he was still healing. So again, another example of showing him going through a healing transformation. And like he said, he didn't know that smell was going to come up. So like I said, what I noticed over time was that he started to become a spirit guide, and he worked with me to answer my spiritual questions like I'm doing now, with you. And so one of the things that we talked about was was dreams. So I had woken up one morning and I had asked him, I said, you can observe my subconscious mind, can't you? And he said, yes. And I said, what about dreams? And he said, yes, if I look in on them, I can see them. And I had read many reports about deceased loved ones making appearances in dreams, so it struck me as a fairly common, easy way for spirits to contact the living. So I said, do you have the ability to appear in my dreams? And he thought about it for a minute, and then he said, yes, I should be able to do it. I'll work on it. Please be patient with me as I learn. So again, this was not something he knew how to do right away. He had to learn, how to do it. And then about a week later, he did start to give me some dreams, but they were not interactive dreams. And so I asked him, I said, can you actually interact with me, in the dreams? And so again, he said, let me work on it. I'll learn. And so then he came back to me, after that and said, gee, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do it. And, we were disappointed, but, we said, okay, he is still learning, and he's acknowledging a limitation here. But then he came back to me again, and he said that he was working with another guide, and so this guide appeared to me. I had never seen him before. It was he appeared as a Cree shaman named Ravenfeather, and he had a headdress and black feathers. And so basically they explained that this other guide, Ravenfeather, had the skill to interact in dreams, and so he was going to teach Alan how to do it. And so sure enough, about a week later, Alan started interacting with me in my dreams. So Alan learned how to do that. So the last incident that I'd like to share was when I was looking at Alan's pictures. I happened to be at work. I had a few minutes to kill when I was on a break, and so I was looking at one of my favorite pictures. It was when Alan was standing in front of a mirror, and he was kind of staring blankly as if contemplating some unknown future, and his reflection behind him was gazing back at his past. And to me, the image was like a symbol of Alan's discarnate soul and his former physical self back to back, forever connected and looking in opposite directions. And that picture actually is on Wattpad at the very top of that chapter. Alan in the Mirror, I think, is the name of that chapter. So the photo inspired me to ask Spirit about Alan's level of soul development. And this is a fascinating subject addressed in a book called Journey of Souls. I had read it in the past. It's by a hypnotherapist named Michael Newton. And that book, in fact, was so popular that he got so many questions, he published a second book called Destiny of Souls. They're both great books. I will include a link to that book below. So anyway, based on information gleaned from numerous subjects under hypnosis, Newton categorizes souls into 3 levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So even Newton is acknowledging that souls go through a transformation. Now, since Alan was demonstrating an extraordinary ability to interact with me across dimensions, I assumed that his soul was advanced. So as I studied the picture, I connected with Alan's essence and asked Spirit to tell me what his soul level was. And I was caught off guard when a force resisted me. I asked again and felt a strong pushback in my mind. Living or deceased, everyone's soul is readable. As unbelievable as it was, Alan was blocking me. What happened next shocked me. The web browser refreshed itself on its own without my touching the phone. When the page reloaded and the photo collage reappeared, the picture of Alan in the mirror was gone. I scrolled up and down the length of the page several times, and the image wasn't there. Alan had removed the picture. Why did you do that? I asked him. My soul level doesn't matter, he answered. These are superficial terms, and the soul's experience is deeper than this. We are evolving all the time in different ways. The soul is complex and difficult to quantify. There is order in the universe and a progression of consciousness moving into higher or expanded states of order. Expanded states of love, really. It's not a hierarchy in human terms. And then I said, he was right. We are beautiful beings of light with fathomless potential for growth and expansion. concerning myself with a hierarchy was a distraction from what truly mattered. So Alan made it very clear in this incident where, he is saying, the soul has a very deep experience. We're evolving all the time in different ways. It's complex and difficult to quantify, and we are moving into higher or expanded states of love. And so I think Alan did an excellent job of explaining not only what he experienced after death, but he's given us an idea of what happens generally, speaking, that we're constantly in a state of evolution and growth. We are not in a static state. So growth happens to the soul no matter what dimension we're in. We think it's only happening here, in this physical dimension, but it's happening in all states of our existence. And so one final note that I wanted to make is there is another book out there that explores this idea too about the soul growing and changing after death. And it's by an author named Cynthia Bourgeault. And the book is called Love is Stronger Than Death, The Mystical Union of Two Souls. I'll put a link to the book below the video for this book also. Cynthia Bourgeault has written many books. She's written about Jesus, Mary Magdalene, The Mystical Heart, Living a Spiritual Life. She's been around for quite a while now. But back in the 90s, she had an experience, and that's what she wrote about in this particular book, Love is Stronger Than Death. She is an Episcopalian priest from Maine, and she had a very complex relationship, which I won't go into, you can read the book, with a Trappist monk in a monastery in Colorado. And so she knew him for, I think, a couple of years before he died. He was older. He was around age 70, I think, when he died. And then afterwards, she continued to feel his presence. And he was giving her signs, and he was indicating to her that he was still growing and changing, the same subject, that we're talking about here. And because of her background in the Christian tradition, she's coming from the mystical Christian tradition specifically, but that was at odds, with her background. And even some of her friends, her well-meaning friends, were saying, oh, he's in another state now, he's moved on, you can't interact with him, he's not interacting with you, just let him go, is basically what they were telling her. And she was like, this is not what I'm experiencing. So she explores that subject in her book, and she acknowledges, that the soul does grow and change, after leaving this life, after the body dies. So I do recommend that book. It's a great book. So with that, please, if you have any questions, please comment below, or you can email me at sonya@sonyawhitejaguar.com. And thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.